You're listening to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, featuring guests who take the scientific talk about food and break it down for practical use. You've heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." Come find out what that really means. Experience conversations with experts in the field of nutrition and understand the power of food for our health, well-being, and beyond. Now, here's your host, registered dietitian and nutritionist, Mathea Ford.
Hi there, it's Mathea. Welcome back to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast featuring nutrition experts who are leading the way using food starts today, right now, with our next guest. It's great to have Melissa Joy Dobbins on the show today. Melissa, welcome to Nutrition Experts.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on the show and share your expertise with my tribe. So let's start with just letting you tell my listeners a little more about you and what you do.
Sure. Well, I've been a registered dietitian for 25 years, I believe. It's almost exactly 25 years. And I've been a certified diabetes educator for 20. And I've had a little bit of a traditional start to my career, but then kind of ended up, I like to call myself the accidental entrepreneur because I really didn't intend to start my own business, but my career path sort of led me that way, and my family path sort of led me that way. But I've done clinical, I've done outpatient, I was a supermarket dietitian, I was a dairy council dietitian, and I worked in a diabetes clinic. And now, since about 2011, I have been on my own doing nutrition communications, media training, other dietitians, anything from traditional media, because that's the bulk of my media and communications experience is live TV interviews in Chicago. So I train dietitians on anywhere from that all the way to merely improving your public speaking skills. I can't spit that out because all dietitians are educators, so we're all communicators. And whether it's one-on-one counseling or group classes or community presentations, blogging, writing, like I said, TV, radio, print interviews, with all of that, we have to be compelling because we have a lot of nutrition nonsense out there, a lot of people sharing information that when they don't have the credibility that we do. And we have to be evidence-based. It's kind of a tall order. We have our work cut out for us. So I really like helping dietitians improve their communication skills.
Okay, Melissa, you said that you have been a dietitian for a long time. So have I, since 21 years. So I have a curious question. What do you think has changed the most in dietetics since you became an RD?
Well, there are certain milestone type things that stick out to me. I remember when I first started working in clinical learning, this is 1993, this is before carb counting. And I remember we had tube feedings, like Glucerna, and then all of a sudden it was no, you don't have to have a special tube feeding for diabetes. And then a few years later, I became a certified diabetes educator, and everything was carb counting, and that was just such a huge shift. And then also, I think the whole concept of, yes, we want to get nutrient-rich foods, which I think is a concept still lost on our patients and clients. I wish we could just focus on doesn't matter what the food is. How much nutrition are you getting out of it? Is it empty calories or does it have nutrients in it? That just the whole concept of you can't get everything from food always. So, for example, the vitamin D deficiency, that I think has been the biggest thing that's happened in my career. Learning that, wow, lots of people have a vitamin D deficiency, getting physicians on board to even check their levels, realizing that depending on the part of the world you live in, I'm in Chicago, we don't have a lot of sun here always, you're probably going to need a supplement. And so that, I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but those are some of the things that come to mind.
No, I think it's just an interesting thing because I remember they didn't even have food labels. They were just coming out with the first food labels in 1994. And I graduated in 96 from college. So we were just learning about them. And now to think of a food without a food label is crazy. But yeah. Okay, so I know you talked just a second ago about the media trainings that you do for dietitians and you do them in person. I personally met you in 2014 in Oklahoma because you came to do a training with us, the Oklahoma Association Dietetics. And I want to know kind of how do you help other dietitians speak out to be the voice of reason? Because like you were talking about, there's lots of other messages out there and not look like the food police. Because I always hated it when people would recognize me in a grocery store and be like, don't look in my cart. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you. I don't care about what's in your cart right now. I mean, I'm not, yeah. So how do you help dietitians with that?
Yeah, I always say, well, don't look in my cart. I won't look in yours.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was a supermarket dietitian, well, I have this funny story. Well, I think it's funny. And then I'll answer your question. When I was a supermarket dietitian, I was kind of recognizable because it's kind of creepy, but they decided to use my picture as part of the logo. So I was off work one day and I went to the store to get hot dogs and wine for a cookout. And I don't think I had like a stitch of makeup on, and I was just wearing like little t-shirt and shorts. And the checkout person recognized me as the Jewel dietitian, and I was so embarrassed. Here I am buying wine and hot dogs. Yeah, great. This is so important. In fact, during one of my media trainings, during this hands-on activity that I do, this messaging activity, we came up with the phrase, dietitians are not the food police. We're more like coaches than referees. And these are the types of things that I try to do, is to take the information, the fact, the stats, the data, whatever, and package it up a little bit more in a compelling way that when people hear it, they're like, oh, I get it. Because we can say all day long, we're not the food police, but kind of giving them that analogy, like we're going to be your coach, we're going to be your cheerleader, we're not, calling the shots and telling you what you're doing wrong. That's the sort of thing that, dietitians are uniquely qualified and poised to do. We just have our work cut out for us, like I said. So we need more dietitian voices out there, kind of taking those sensational headlines and translating them into meaningful, helpful bottom lines for people. We do a lot of great work with one-on-one counseling and group classes, but when we expand that communication to reach larger audiences through traditional media or social media, there's some changes that happen with that. It's a little challenging to take a recommendation for somebody who's sitting in front of you and you're tailoring everything to their preferences and then trying to translate that to the masses. There's a lot of challenges inherent in that. But when we're reaching a larger population with these realistic and I'd like to say helpful tips and advice, that helps everybody. It's a win-win. It elevates the presence and appearance of the dietitian, the understanding of what we really do and who we really are, and it helps the public, eat healthier. So that's what I try to do with my media trainings and in my own nutrition communications, whether it's a TV segment, my podcast, or writing a blog, or just simply a social media post.
So, do you have any ideas or tips for dietitians who may be on social media, if they see some false information? What types of things do you use to respond to that, or to educate instead of and help the public?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, when I was a National Dairy Council spokesperson, I had the privilege, I won't say the pleasure because it was hard, but I had the privilege of engaging in several crisis communications trainings. And what I learned, whether it's, again, traditional media or social media, what I learned is the best defense is a strong offense. So I'd encourage dietitians not to just wait around and sort of reply or respond when they see something inaccurate. I do encourage that you speak up when you feel the need, and there's a few nuances we can discuss. But in general, if you're just putting out credible, helpful, meaningful information on an ongoing basis instead of just kind of responding when you see something that's negative. And so like a specific suggestion is, I'm a diabetes educator. That's kind of the lane I swim in. I don't know as much about gluten intolerance or paleo or keto, so I don't talk about those things very much. So I swim in my own lane, and when something that I see comes up that's not right about diabetes, I'll set the record straight, either again, like with a reply or response. But more importantly, I try to put credible information out about diabetes all the time so that when people hear something and they're not sure if it's true or not, when they go looking for information, there's a lot of credible information that they're going to find. Now, one caveat to this is sort of those haters on social media. You do have to be really careful. I tell people this, you don't want to get into a food fight, for lack of a better term, with haters. There are people who are willing and able to have a healthy, respectable conversation and kind of share different viewpoints and listen. And then there are people who are just really out to be mean and hateful. I wrote a 250-word book review it was a paleo diet book review when I was an Academy spokesperson. And you can't say a whole lot in 250 words, but I did say, I'm reviewing this book because the paleo diet has lots of different iterations and some look a lot different than others. But this book, I, shared my thoughts on it and tried to be as professional as possible with my word choices. And somebody didn't like that review and posted on Facebook, and they called me the C word. And I was shocked. Of course, I'm just like sick to my stomach and so mad, and I wanted to respond. And I thought, this is not something you respond to. If they're going to call me the C word, these people are unreasonable, and they're not going to listen to the facts and the information or anything that's not what they think.
Yeah, that I understand that dilemma because I have several books on Amazon and people write reviews and you're like, oh, I want to respond to that so bad. But yes, sometimes people are just irrational. So, and you do have to not take it personal. But I love what you said about having those messages already in your social media and on your website and stuff, because when you respond to that information that needs to be corrected, adjusted, explained, whatever, then somebody clicks on your name, goes to your profile or your information, they're going to see that, oh, she consistently posts about this topic, and therefore she knows what she's talking about. So that also lends to your credibility.
Yeah. And another thing that I think is really important, I think that we, when we're thinking about credibility and evidence-based information, sound science, we think, oh, I've got to make sure everybody knows I've got all these credentials and I did schooling and this and this and that. And yes, that's definitely important, and that differentiates us from the celebrity, quote unquote, experts. But really, we need to remember that being real and human and relatable is just as important, because people are listening to advice from people like them and people that they trust. And they may not just automatically trust the credibility factor. They hear it, they know it. Okay, they know where you're coming from. But we need a little bit more to engage that trust.
I absolutely, because I know people do things based on referrals. Absolutely. So I know people do things based on their friends' referrals or whatever. So yes, being somebody that people can know, like, and trust, and being that personable. Like, I don't put everyday perfect pictures of my food on Instagram. So act like I never, ever eat, a piece of cheesecake type thing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you say to people when they bring up these celebrity diets or their fad diets that seem to have a grain of truth? They started somewhere with some truth or some scientific basis, but they're not nutritionally sound. How do you help dietitians to respond to that too?
I think we all know how to respond with, well, let me tell you about the pros and cons of this particular diet. And again, I do think it's important to swim in your own lane. I think when we start talking about things that we're not real experts in that particular area, we can be on sort of loose footing. We've got to kind of make sure that we're addressing the science. And in order to do that, like I said, with diabetes, I'm comfortable. There's still even areas within diabetes that I'm not comfortable taking a deep dive into, and I refer to colleagues of mine for that. But I think that what we forget is everybody's an expert in food because everybody eats. It will really go a long way to emphasize when we're talking to either somebody one-on-one or on social media that you have the choice to choose what's best for you. I would like you to make as informed a choice as possible. I like to tell people, I want them to be informed and unafraid. We know that people make decisions based on feelings. They're not going to stick to just the facts, but hopefully the feelings aren't fear. We don't want people to make food choices out of fear. So we want to kind of present them with the information and let them make their own well-informed decision. And here's a specific example. A few weeks ago in ballet class, my friend was talking about organic, and she said, well, you're a dietitian. Do I need to buy all organic produce? And I said, well, what's your concern? And she said, my mother is recovering from breast cancer and she doesn't want me. And this woman is probably mid-40s. And she wants me and my family to only, buy organic. And I said, well, I don't use only organic. It's a personal choice. However, if you're telling me that you don't think you can afford it and you just don't think it's realistic to buy organic all the time, let me refer you to a website, safefruitsandveggies.com. It's the Alliance for Food and Farming, and it's a group of, it's an organization that is made up of both organic and conventional farmers. And it shares all the research on actually, as we know, the benefits of getting produce far outweigh any potential risks of pesticide residues, and that people aren't getting enough fruits and vegetables. And the best thing you can do to prevent cancer is to get more produce. So they have all the research and everything there. So I said, this is, my experience, but here's a place where you can go and take a deeper look, take a deeper dive, and make your own decision.
I know you also have some things that dietitians can use. You have a sound science toolkit.
Yes. So I created this. It's basically just a compilation of resources to help dietitians, and really anybody can look at it. It's a free downloadable on my site, but it's a compilation of resources to help dietitians understand and communicate nutrition research better. So it's not specific to any food or product or disease state. It's things like, what are the different types of studies? Which ones are stronger than others? What are some of the limitations in nutrition research? What's the difference between risk and hazard? What's the difference between correlation and causation? In fact, I just came across a new resource today that I'm going to add to it, and it's an article that Karen Collins wrote for Today's Dietitian on communicating nutrition research. And it just addresses things like bias, and it's not just the funding source that could be a potential source of bias. There's other things that we need to understand and be reminded of. Maybe we learn these things in school, but there's really nobody reminding us of these things. So I put everything together in the Sound Science Toolkit, and people can go to my website at soundbitesrd.com. It's right on the homepage. I'm actually in the process of revising it. I'm constantly adding new resources to it. But you should either see it as a pop-up or on the homepage. And it's something that I felt would be helpful for me. So I thought, why not put it together and share it with other dietitians?
Yeah, I love that, because it is sometimes hard to make sure that you're being just clear and doing and understanding the studies and stuff if it's been a while. since you've been to school, then you may be out of practice. So I know you work with brands a little bit. Any tips for RDs that want to work with brands that align with their work?
Basically, you said it. Make sure that the food or product aligns with your values and what you stand for. Not all dietitians will agree on the same foods and products. We've seen that within our community. And I'll just throw in a side note there, don't judge others. People have different preferences and different types of clients. So they're going to want to know more about different foods, different brands. And, if I'm working with the diabetes population and my clients are, eating fast food, I want to know as much as I can about those food products. But I definitely think that, you want to think about, is this a food group or a food product that you're willing to go to the mat on? I think that, it's easy to say, yeah, I'm working with a fruit and veggie company. But when you start, like even juice, oh my gosh, I consulted with Welch's, and I firmly believe that 100% juice fits into our diets and can help us meet our produce recommendations, even if you have diabetes. And, no one's saying to drink a gallon of it, but the haters just come out of the woodwork, even with dairy. I couldn't believe how many haters came out of the woodwork when I worked with dairy. I'm like, for crying out loud, if you don't want to drink it, don't drink it. But don't try to malign the science that's behind this. And, I was willing to go to the mat and say, no, I stand behind this and I'm not going to waver. If it's something that you might not be willing to do that, then I wouldn't work with that food product or that company.
Yeah, that's interesting because I do a lot of kidney disease stuff. I tend to look for like the lower protein, less, not whole wheat, white bread. So I know that kind of goes against recommendations, but it doesn't go against recommendations for that condition. So that's a great example. What you talked about. I mean, even if I just talk about tomatoes, not necessarily as part of a brand, but just talk about tomatoes, there's a huge group of people that are like, how dare you ever tell people with kidney disease they could eat tomatoes? So anyway.
Yeah, it depends on your population. It depends on the person.
So if a dietitian was approached by a brand, how do you recommend that they think about working with them? What types of things can dietitians do when they work with brands?
Well, I'll back up one step because I get this question a lot from dietitians. How do you start working with brands? They're not approaching me. So I always say, become a super fan of that food or product and get to know that company, whether it's a commodity or manufacturer, and, show them that you are a super fan on social media. Now, there's a little caveat to that. Sometimes if a company sees that you're already a super fan, they may not be as interested in hiring you because you're already, kind of promoting their stuff. But hopefully, they would see the value that, hey, this is somebody who we could give them even more information about our product and kind of have a really good relationship with. So if you get approached or if you reach out to a company to work with them, one of the things that I recommend is, first of all, you don't have to do it all. So for example, when I work with a company, I don't do recipe development. I don't do recipe testing. I don't do nutrition analysis.
Yeah.
I know people who do. So I say I can subcontract that out, or I can suggest somebody who does that. But here are my areas of expertise. I can do television interviews. I can do podcast interviews. I can write a blog. I can do social media posts. There's so many things. I can do a webinar. I can speak for you. But I'm not going to do recipe development because it's not my area of expertise. So you don't have to do it all. And I think ideally, you want to work with a brand in a way that is the best fit for you. So I've had clients come to me and say, okay, you've been writing some consumer-focused blogs for us. Next year, we want you to write some health professional-focused blogs and dig into the science. And while that sounds really interesting, and I thought, this is an opportunity to get into more science and learn more about this particular product, in reality, it would not be the most efficient use of my time. And I know others who do that. So I, instead of just saying, yes, I'll do whatever work comes my way, I went back to the company and I said, this sounds really interesting, but these types of activities, podcast interviews, satellite media tours, television interviews, those types of things are really more in my wheelhouse right now and would be the type of work I would prefer to do with you. And have you thought about so-and-so, and named a couple of specific people who do a lot more science writing, and they ended up hiring that other person to do that and me to do the types of things that are really more the type of work I'm doing right now.
So I think that's two great points. Like you said, know your expertise, know what you're good at, and know what you just do not want to do. And then number two, networking. So can you talk about how you network, how you know people, what you do to network with other dietitians?
Oh, yes. It's my favorite thing. The friendships and relationships I've had in my career are just so important to me. I left my outpatient job in 2000 to become a supermarket dietitian. And just a few weeks ago, I had my 18th annual reunion with the dietitians I used to work at that job, including our boss. So every summer I get us all together, and those relationships are so important. And when I became an entrepreneur and, you're all by yourself, I really love team environments, but, you're all by yourself in your home office. Not only did I join the Nutrition Entrepreneurs DPG, but I was on the board. I was the Speakers and Media Specialty Chair. And that was just such a great way to get involved, not have too much work or pressure, because it wasn't like I was the chair, like the president, but I got to really meet some really cool people doing some really cool things, whether you're seeing them online or, like you, like we met in person at a conference and now we stay connected online. It's really been fun. And my philosophy has always been, I've always thought, hey, I'm not an expert in this, but you are, so I'm going to refer to you, or can you help me understand, even as an outpatient dietitian and all my clinical dietitians that were on my team, I would say, okay, I'm the only outpatient dietitian, but I've got this patient coming in. Maybe they have food allergy or some other area that just wasn't my area of expertise. And I said, how can you help me help this patient? And I do this a lot with media interviews. When I get asked to do a media interview that's just kind of not my cup of tea, I'll say, hey, I'd like to refer you to so-and-so. They are an expert in this area. And it's just, there's enough work and enough opportunities to go around. Let's not be selfish. I've never wanted to hog the spotlight. I always want to lift others up. I have called myself a dietitian enthusiast for years. I just think it just comes second nature to me.
Excellent. So going to meetings, going to even just your local association, or your state association meetings and meeting people, and just knowing, we have a little, in Oklahoma, we have a little Facebook group for the dietitians in Oklahoma that somebody will post in there, I need a dietitian in Tulsa who does peds or who does this or that, or peds with food allergies or autism or whatever. And it just helps us all to, like you said, I don't want to see those parents if there's somebody that could do them so much better, and I'll still, like you said, there's plenty to go around. So that's excellent. So you talked a little bit about being a podcaster. We're both podcasters. So what do you love the most about being a podcaster?
Oh, definitely the interviews, talking to my guests. So much so that I think I have a little problem, because I think I have like 13 shows in the can right now. And maybe you can relate to that, Mathea. The rest of it, the production, even though I outsource the editing and everything, just the production aspect is not nearly as fun. I love talking to my guests, and I say I kind of geek out on my guests.
Yeah, I find, I agree. You have to love to talk to be a podcaster, and you just have to have a natural interest in people. Sounds like you do. So what's your most popular episode podcast episode topic that you talk about?
So my podcast is a variety of topics, anything from diabetes to agriculture to, I dabble a little bit in like mindful eating, body image, but there's so many podcasts solely devoted to that. I don't really get too much into that. But I've talked about fertility, like I said, farming, food myths and fads, and celebrity pseudoscience. I really tend to gravitate toward the like consumer insights and basically just helping people think about something differently. You know, you've heard that sustainable seafood, you know, like there's something wrong with farmed fish, but really you've got it backwards. So, you know, like the pesticides in produce, like, you know, okay, you might hear these scary headlines, but here's actually the science. So, like I said, it's a variety of topics. My most popular episode, like I'll do a survey every year and different people like different episodes. But as far as downloads, most recently, I interviewed Dr. Julie Miller-Jones about grains. And here I'm thinking, I mean, I know grains can be, you know, controversial in the media as far as like paleo or gluten or
keto.
Yeah, all the fad diets, the diets that say to cut grains out. But ultimately, I'm kind of like, well, grains seems like such a boring topic. I hope people will listen to this show. And Julie Miller-Jones, I mean, I could listen to her for like all day. And so I was really excited to see that that episode got a lot of downloads, because I feel like at first blush, people are kind of like, they either think grains are boring, I get it, I need to get fiber, I need to get whole grains, what are you going to tell me that's new? Or I don't do grains because I'm keto, paleo, whatever. So I just thought, who's going to even be open to digging into this topic? And I'm so excited that it's been one of the most downloaded episodes. Another popular one is with, I interviewed Timothy Caulfield, who is a health law professor in Canada, and he is like totally doing the smackdown on celebrity pseudoscience. I saw him speak at a conference, and he started a TV show that is not airing in the U.S. yet, but it's called Cheating Death. And he has several books. His first book was titled "Does Gwyneth Paltrow Have It All Wrong?" So he's been, you know, kind of getting on her case for a while. So he's just doing some amazing work, and that's also been a really popular episode.
If we think about everything we've talked about, a lot about media training, podcasting, being out in the public, what are some ways that listeners who are dietitians, healthcare professionals, and regular individuals can use this information in like their daily life? How do they implement some of what we've talked about? Just like you wouldn't hopefully do your own taxes or cut your own hair or whatever, I don't know. A dietitian can really help. And if you go to eatright.org, there's a button or a tab that helps you find an expert, not only in your area, but one that specializes in whatever that you need help with, like diabetes or cholesterol. I even recently took my husband to a dietitian because his cholesterol's been high for 10 years. And, you know, I can tell him to eat more oatmeal and, you know, get more exercise, but, you know, eat more fish. But what else is there? Like, I don't know the specifics like I would if it was diabetes. So, you know, you can definitely get a lot of good support from the dietitian. And for the dietitians and healthcare professionals, my advice is, you know, follow your passion, take as deep a dive as you can in whatever areas interest you, and find a way to communicate more, whether it's doing more speaking or it's writing or, you know, social media. Just find a way to communicate more within your area of expertise. And yeah, network with dietitians and other healthcare professionals. I find social media a great way to do that. And that's the workshop that I did where we met, Mathea, was, you know, find ways to get involved in social media that are enriching and not stressful for you. Like, I meet the most interesting people on Twitter. And as much as I don't spend very much time on Twitter, but I love it because of that. And, you know, when you find somebody who has kind of common interests and you see articles or videos or information that they're sharing that
you didn't know about. It's just really exciting. So follow your passion and find a way to communicate your area.
So what about dietitians who work for a hospital or don't own their own business, aren't necessarily entrepreneurs? What do you say to them, how they can implement it?
Yeah, and this is like my favorite example, because I say, okay, even if you are a clinical inpatient, maybe dialysis dietitian, wouldn't it be great if the local media knew that you were an expert in that area? So let's say a celebrity has that particular disease, you can speak to it. So it doesn't have to be that every dietitian needs to do, on camera TV interviews, but it could be the newspaper where you talk to them and you share the science in a way that people can understand, which again, we do that with our patients and clients. We're not using a ton of jargon and technical information. We're explaining it in ways that people can understand. So it's the same with the media.
Yeah, I also think you're not always going to have that job. And if you have it out there in the public that you're an expert in a certain area and you want another job, or somebody's looking for someone as an expert in that area, you can have more opportunities that way too.
Yes, and definitely building your communication skills is one of the best, if not the best thing you can do for your career, because there's always inside communications, external communications, even negotiating a raise or, presenting to your team, writing an email, for crying out loud. Boosting your communication skills is really a great way to enhance your career and get more visibility and more success.
I love it. So, Melissa, I always ask my guests, what's your favorite food?
That's such a hard question. I could say pizza or chocolate. The funny thing is, I'm more of a liquids person. Okay, my favorite food is soup because it's liquid. Like my friends and family know. Like right now, I have a glass of water, a decaf coffee, and a diet soda in front of me. So I usually have several beverages at a time. But yeah, so I don't know. I love all food, but yeah, probably my favorite food is soup.
Any particular soup or just cream soups or?
I love my mom's chili. I love Italian wedding soup. I have a great recipe from Giada that is, you even make your own meatballs, which it sounds so hard, but it's actually very easy. More like probably like broth based with like lots of stuff in it.
Yeah, I love soup too, but I can imagine living in Chicago, there's a little more
opportunities.
More opportunities to eat soup. So, well, Melissa, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. I know my listeners have learned a lot about media, getting out there, being more public, and just making sure our expertise is known. So if listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they can find me online. My website is soundbitesrd.com, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Melissa Joy RD. I'm on Facebook as Melissa Joy Dobbins, the guilt-free RD Soundbites. Where else? Oh, obviously my podcast. You can find my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere you consume podcasts. It's Sound Bites, 2 words, with Melissa Joy Dobbins. And definitely check it out if you like podcasts. Hopefully you'll like mine. And Mathea, thank you so much for doing your show and for elevating the visibility of dietitians and supporting dietitians.
Thank you. Well, guys, this has been another great episode of Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast that is all about learning more so you can do more with nutrition in your life.
You've just listened to an episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast. Be sure to get more information about this week's episode at www.nutritionexpertspodcast.com. Tune in next time for another great conversation with a nutrition expert and expand your personal knowledge in the field of nutrition, one conversation at a time.